When we look at the headlines, most of the focus is on the front lines inside Ukraine. But the war is increasingly spilling across the border. So today, we're going to take a look at how Russia's Kursk region has, transformed into an active conflict zone, where shelling and drone strikes have pretty much become a part of daily life.
Let's kick things off with this really stark quote from Kursk's acting governor, Alexander Khinshtein. It just perfectly captures the official Russian view on all this, that these attacks are all about creating fear and disruption for civilians.
So what does this new front actually look like on the ground? Well, for the people living in this Russian border region, the war has well and truly arrived, and with an intensity that's completely reshaping their day-to-day lives.
Okay, just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, listen to this. On a single night, Russian air defenses reported shooting down 148 Ukrainian drones across the entire country. And get this, that was just in a 3-hour window. It really points to a massive, coordinated effort.
And it's not just the sheer number, it's how incredibly concentrated these attacks are. In just one 24-hour period, of the 85 drones downed across Russia, a staggering 47 of them were aimed specifically at the Kursk region.
So, we're not talking about a few random, isolated incidents here. The sources describe this relentless pattern. You've got shelling, drone strikes, even cross-border incursions. This constant barrage has effectively turned a part of Russia itself into an active conflict zone.
But beyond the numbers, what's the real human cost? I mean, what does it actually feel like for civilians to live under this kind of constant threat?
Well, these attacks are hitting residential areas. In the town of Elgov, for example, a 2-story apartment building was badly damaged and 1 person was injured. It's just a stark reminder that these strikes have immediate, very real consequences for ordinary people.
And it's not just homes. Critical infrastructure is also being targeted. After a series of drone strikes hit local electrical substations, more than 16,000 people were suddenly left without power.
And when you start looking at the casualty reports from just a handful of these attacks, wow, it paints a really grim picture. 1 civilian killed in Karish, another injured in Sukhanovka, 4 killed in Logov, 5 in Rilsk. Each one of those numbers is a life that's been directly and tragically impacted.
Now, running right alongside this physical conflict on the ground, there's this intense information war going on, and the exact same events are being framed in radically different ways depending on who you're listening to.
I mean, just listen to the language the acting governor uses here. Crime, Nazis, peaceful civilians. This is the official Russian narrative, plain and simple, portraying every single attack on its territory as a straight-up act of terrorism.
So let's break it down. You've basically got 2 primary interpretations. From Russia's side, these are acts of terrorism against civilians. But from a wider international perspective, they're seen as cross-border military operations inside an ongoing war that Russia itself started.
But to get the full picture, you really have to zoom out. And this data from the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine is absolutely crucial for context. It reports that 97% of all civilian casualties in this conflict have occurred in Ukrainian-controlled territory. Now, this doesn't diminish the suffering of civilians in Kursk. Not at all. What it does, though, is it places it within the much larger context of a truly devastating humanitarian crisis that's affecting millions of people on both sides of this border.
So, okay, we've heard the official statements, we've looked at the military statistics, but what about the people actually living through this? How are they reacting to this new reality?
And it really all boils down to this question. It gets right to the heart of the frustration that a lot of local Russian residents are feeling. They feel like they're caught in the middle, and they're shouting, but they're not sure if anyone is even listening.
In fact, people have actually taken to the streets to protest. They're saying their repeated pleas for help and clarity from their own government are just met with these formal, bureaucratic replies that don't offer any real solutions.
In this one quote from a protester, it's just incredibly powerful. The demand isn't for pity. It's a demand for justice, for accountability, and for their basic rights as citizens to be protected by their own government.
All right, so let's pull back again and look at the big picture. What does all of this actually mean for the war as a whole? What do these attacks inside Russia tell us about how this conflict is changing?
The biggest takeaway here is how the very geography of the war is expanding. That clear line that used to exist between the military front and the civilian home front, well, it's getting really blurry, and it's erasing any sense of safety for people in these border regions.
So let's just quickly summarize the key takeaways. First, the war has absolutely expanded into Russian territory, and it's doing so with real intensity.
Second, it's civilians on both sides of the border who are bearing the terrible cost of this escalation. And third, these attacks are at the very center of a fierce information war, with both sides pushing their own conflicting narratives.
And that leaves us with a really tough question to think about. As these attacks in regions like Kursk continue, that traditional idea of a distant battlefield is just collapsing. It forces all of us to consider a difficult new reality. When the war comes home, where does the front line actually end?